the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled is actor Orson Bean and author-teacher Kay Cordell Whitaker. Orson Bean's career spans over 50 years when he started in the golden age of television at Playhouse 90 and The Twilight Zone. 6 years on Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, 7 years on the panel To Tell the Truth and hosting The Tonight Show, 20 years on Broadway and Never Too Late and Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter. You were so long on Broadway that Subways Are Not for Sleeping garnered you a Tony Award nomination. Mm-hmm. And then you went on to movies, or during the same time, independent films, being John Malkovich, and now you're on the stage in Aram Saroyan's At the Beach House. What was the golden age? You were born in Massachusetts, born and raised in Massachusetts, and you've been going ever since.
Well, I don't know what the golden age was, but the so-called golden age of television was when it was live and anything could happen. People would forget their lines and go up. I remember one time watching a friend of mine. He said, "I'm on Philco Playhouse tonight. Watch me." I said, "Okay." And it was a scene in an airplane with the fake clouds going by the window. And he's talking to this guy, and the guy freaked and went up, and my friend tried to feed him a cue line or two, and he couldn't do it. And then you'd hear the floor manager whispering the line to him, and finally my friend, who wanted everyone at home to know it wasn't him, went.
It went to sleep. But that was all live broadcasts, right?
Yes. I did a live Playhouse 90 of Charlie's Aunt, and there was a pie throwing scene, and for 3 weeks we'd rehearsed it, and the camera followed the pie right to Art Carney's face. But on the air, the actor throwing the pie tripped, and the camera, having rehearsed for 3 weeks to follow the pie, did so, even though the pie flew right onto a stagehand's knee.
And you followed him to that?
They said, "What did you follow it for?" He said, "I couldn't help myself. You had me do it for 3 weeks."
But that was the time when you first started, I guess, after your stand-up time.
Yeah, well,
were you going to be an actor?
I was given a magic set when I was 6 years old, and I never recovered. I'm still a member of the Magic Castle, and
oh, you are?
Oh, yeah. And I still do. In fact, last week I did my 20 minutes of magic at the church fall festival for the kids. You know, so I can still do a good solid 20 minutes of magic.
Do you fool them?
Oh yeah, yeah. The kids are the roughest. They won't look where you want them to.
Oh, is that what
It's
happens?
in your pocket. Ah, shut up, you little brat.
That's what they do. But so you started with the magic.
Yeah.
But you went in the service.
Well, I went in the Army for a year and a half after high school and did the magic act to get out of kitchen police, KP.
Oh, you were doing, how clever.
Yeah, I spent a year in Japan. And then I came back and started working in nightclubs doing a comedy magic act to no discernible response, I might add. But little by little, I did less and less of the magic and more of the stand-up. Then I went to New York and auditioned for and got a job at the Blue Angel, which was a well-known supper club.
Yes.
We got $125 a week in those days, and we're happy to get it. And there were 4 acts on the bill, and I remember that when I was there, the 4 acts were Harry Belafonte, Eartha Kitt, Nichols and May, and me.
Oh, at the Blue Angel?
Yeah, Mike Nichols and Elaine May were doing their improv stuff. The guy who played the piano was named Bart Howard, and he wrote, "Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars."
Well, so that was a golden time, too.
Oh, yeah. Bart said, "There's a kid here. I think I might let him record this." I said, "What's his name?" He says, "Johnny Mathis." I never heard of him, but he's pretty good.
So all of that was going on in New York?
Oh, yeah. Out in the out in the outer room where people waited for tables, Bobby Short was playing the piano, and a lot of college kids in their dates would come, and they still come up to me. They're old now. They say, I met my wife watching you at the Blue Angel. I said, great.
But you never had to take acting lessons then?
Oh, I studied with everybody.
Oh, you did?
I studied acting endlessly. I studied with Uta Hagen and Eli Wallach and Paul Mann and Lloyd Richards before he went and took over Yale. And I studied singing endlessly with a guy named John Howell who taught opera. I studied dance, I studied fencing, I studied everything. I studied tap dancing.
But that was like not going to college. That was your college.
Yeah. To me, if you really want to be an actor, it's a waste of 4 years to go to college. You should spend the time learning the things that you really want to do.
But one thing that they couldn't teach you was that repartee. That was one of the reasons you were on these panel shows, I guess, because you had to ad-lib or come up with stories.
Yeah.
Were any of those rehearsed?
No. Well, I mean, some were rehearsed in my head. I mean, when I did the Johnny Carson show over 200 times. Over 100 of them was a substitute host. Back in the days before the Tonight Show was such a big deal. It was in New York. It was a big deal, but they didn't have all of these huge movie stars coming on, and I was kind of the regular substitute host first when Jack Parr would go on vacation, and then Johnny.
And after Steve Allen.
Yeah. Yeah, after Steve Allen, but I worked with Steve Allen on his show too.
You?
Yeah. Even before Steve Allen, there was a show called Broadway Open House with Jerry Lester and a dame named Dagmar.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah,
I mean, I remember reading about it.
Yeah. Well, you were too little to stay up that late. But when I was doing the Tonight Show, they would let me do my interview over the phone. They would say, what do you want to talk to Johnny about? And I would say, tell him to ask me about the time I went out with a chicken. Tell him. But the best times were when we would never get to the notes. I would start talking about something that had occurred to me, and Johnny would start, and then the 5 subjects that we were supposed to go to, we never arrived at. Sometimes, I remember one time, the people before me were talking about would they leave their organs when they died, their eyes, their liver, whatever. And Johnny said to me, now you must have heard that conversation. I said, well, are you going to leave anything? I said, I intend to leave myself intact to a needy necrophiliac. Well, Johnny howled. Nobody in the audience knew what necrophiliac
They didn't get it.
No.
That was good.
Yeah, but I didn't care.
But you came on as a guest.
Yeah.
Oh, you were a guest?
Well, I mean, first I was a substitute host in the early days, and then after he moved out to California, I became a guest, and I was on just under 100 times as a guest. When Johnny retired, NBC released the top 10 most frequent guests, and I always tell people I was number 6, just under, you'll pardon the expression, Charles Nelson Riley.
You were just But did you have to take any kind of, I guess you can't take lessons in storytelling.
No.
But how does that come to you so naturally?
My grandmother was a storyteller. My grandfather had a great sense of humor, and I think I just picked it up. I love language, and I love kind of using language as a toy. Language can be used in many different ways. You know, back in the days when people grunted and groaned before there was language, the language was sign language. A guy with the guy with the strongest arm would get the dame with the least fur. It still works out that way.
It reminded me a little bit of when you were saying that Sid Caesar, where he would make up his own languages.
Yeah, sure. He used to have he would do the Japanese movies. Take a Cookie Productions presents, and he would do a takeoff on the big Japanese art films.
Could you ever do that kind of thing?
No, I don't do
Yours
that.
Yours was just storytelling.
I'm one of the great joke tellers in the world. But there's no money to be made in jokes, even though they did make a movie recently called The Aristocrats.
Oh, yeah.
You mean, I tell jokes just for fun, and...
But when you're on the set, you've made a lot of independent films. I know you made 40 Deuce with Paul Morrissey, who's a great old friend of mine. And, of course, the John Malkovich movie that you made.
Being John Malkovich was a wonderful picture, and I was proud to be in it. But jokes is what I do for fun. When Henny Youngman died, the New York Times, in lieu of the traditional obit, printed a selection of Henny's jokes. That's the way I'd like to be remembered.
With a joke
My
telling?
favorite, well, I mean, I just tell some funny stuff when you die. It's like having a wake and everybody gets drunk. My favorite joke of Henny's was, a guy needs a lawyer. He looks in the yellow pages, he finds Schwartz, 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 and Schwartz. He calls up and says, let me speak to Mr. Schwartz, please. He says, he's not here, he's out playing golf. He says, then let me speak to Mr. Schwartz. He says, he passed away some years ago, he's no longer with the firm. He says, then let me speak to Mr. Schwartz. He's in Chicago, he'll be back on Friday. He says, then let me speak to Mr. Schwartz. He says, speaking. See, a joke is a minor literary form.
Exactly.
But,
and it gives you this image.
That's right.
You have this image.
Yeah.
When you were on Broadway, did you sing and dance?
Yes, I did. I was in John Mary Anderson's Almanac, which is the last of the great showgirl revues. Harry Belafonte was in that too. A great English comedian named Hermione Gingold was the star, and Billy DeWolf. And I built my paper tree in it, a little magic trick that kept me out of the big money for many years. And did some of my routines and was in the sketches. And then other musicals I was in were Subways for Sleeping. Then I spent a year working opposite Melina McCurry in the stage version of Never on Sunday.
Oh, so you had to dance.
Not Armenian, but Greek.
Close enough. Oh, so all that training came on the stage, came in the films.
Yeah.
You know, it just seems like it comes so naturally when you talk to Orson Bean, because you think of him as, I don't know, just a person on stage.
Well, I don't know.
You know,
I think you have to learn it in order to forget it.
Maybe. Did you work, now you're playing the Walter Matthau role in At the Beach House by Aram Saroyan. Did you know Walter Matthau?
I did indeed. I worked with him a number of times. In fact, I worked with him when he met his wife. And his wife is the character, the fictionalized version of which is married to me in my fictionalized Walter Matthau in this play. And Carol Grace had married Saroyan, I believe, when she was 16 years old. And she had 2 kids with him at a very early age, and finally she had enough of them and left.
But did you know those kids?
I got to meet Aram when I think he was 11 or 12 years old.
Oh, you did?
Backstage at the show. Walter and I were starring in the show along with Jane Mansfield. And
her daughter's a great actress too now.
Yeah,
she's great. Mariska Hargitay.
I was there the day that Jane Mansfield met Mickey Hargitay. Jane Mansfield was always wanted to know who was out in the audience. She was always interested. Is there any movie stars out there? And she would have me to peek through the curtain. Orson, tell me who's out there. Look through the curtain. And I said, oh, there's a gorgeous guy out there that is with Mae West's Muscle Man show, and his name is Mickey Hargitay. I had heard of him. Oh, she said, tell him to come back afterwards. So I managed to get to the usher to go to him and said, Miss Mansfield would like to meet you afterwards. Well, a lot of people were waiting for her autograph, and when he came back, they just fell in love instantly. And they walked together up the aisle of the theater with her signing autographs, and she took his arm, and they strolled up 42nd Street. Her, you know, with the boobs and the blonde hair, and him with the muscles. They looked like the Aurora Borealis.
I bet.
They were inseparable ever since.
He was a very nice person, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Very
well, I knew
nice.
her little daughter, Marie, who was about 6 years old when she was in the show with me. We ran that a year.
Oh,
Success Boy, Rock Hunter.
Oh, you were all in it.
Yeah.
So the monologue that you have in At the Beach House is very long.
Yeah.
How do you remember all of that? Because you're a storyteller.
Yeah.
You can tell stories, but you have to memorize everything.
I have to memorize it syllable for syllable. I don't ad-lib it. When I do my own stuff, I ad-lib off the top of my head. But I have great respect for Aram Saroyan's writing, and I wouldn't change a syllable of it unless I went to him and I said, I think this word would be better here, which I did a couple of times. But aside from that, it's easy to remember if you learn it precisely.
Is there a cadence?
Well, there is a cadence, but it's really just rote work. But as I was saying to you before we started doing the show, the memory is a muscle. And if you use any muscle, you become better at it. So most people never have occasion to memorize a lot. So they say, oh, how do you do that?
I know.
That's the easiest part of it.
I saw you doing crossword puzzles.
Yeah.
So that's, and you see all the time the doctor saying to get into old age and for longevity you have to keep using your brain, look for a new thing to do, exercise, keep fit.
Yeah.
And you're proving it by doing that, I guess.
Crossword puzzles mainly help you with other crossword puzzles. You learn words that you never find except in another crossword puzzle. The entrance to a mine is an adit. Who the hell cares?
I know, and who would know that?
Yak, Aoudad, gnu. These are animals you only find in crossword puzzles.
That's why I can't do them. I'm not smart enough. But Marcia Rod is your director.
Yeah, and a wonderful one.
She moves you around.
Yeah.
How did she react to the characters? Did she know them in real life?
No, I don't think so. But the point is that he has written fictionalized versions of the characters. So I know how Walter used to walk and how he used to talk, and I used some of that. But I wouldn't have had to. Other actors, if they ever played, who didn't know him. I mean, the nature of a fictionalized character that's based on a real character is that it really isn't the character. It's not like playing Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Right, I see, because see.
So most people wouldn't know that it's Walter Matthau. His friends do.
We all know.
Yeah.
We all know, and we loved your performance.
Oh, thank you.
Orson Bean, thanks for coming with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And don't go away. We'll be right back with author Kay Cordell Whitaker. I was nervous. Hi, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm with author, teacher, Kay Cordell Whitaker. She graduated from the University of Santa Cruz and the University of Oregon, where she taught for several years. Kay Whitaker apprenticed for 13 years with the shamans of Eastern Andes. Her new book, Sacred Link, Joining Fortunes with the Unknown, follows what is now a classic, The Reluctant Shaymin. If we start with The Reluctant Shaymin, it'll lead us into The Secret Link. How did the first book come about?
The first book started when my teachers, my adopted grandparents from Peru, asked me to write down everything that they had been teaching me for over 13 years.
Ah, that's what happened. But how did you meet them? That was pretty bizarre.
That's a long, involved story. I detailed it in that first book right there, The Reluctant Shaymin. And I met them the very first time on the beach cliff in Santa Cruz in the middle of a huge storm. Mm-hmm. They don't have storms with lightning and, like once 100 years they do. And here was this incredible storm. I was up in the mountains and borrowed a truck, found babysitter for the kids, and ran off down the mountainside to get to the beach. And no one else was there. Nobody was crazy enough. The waves were coming all the way up into the parking lot. And I got out of the truck and I was just standing there getting drenched and soaking it in, and the lightning was striking nearby. I mean, you could smell it. And I was all alone there for a while, and then this man came running at me, and he was all muddy and drenched and, looked like he had kind of raggy clothes on. And when he got close enough, I could hear him. He was yelling in broken English, something like, boy, do I have something for you.
Oh,
and I thought,
there.
oh, no.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, this is bad news.
Right.
And so I was really terrified.
So then 13 years later, what did they teach you?
Oh, they taught me their way of living, their way of thinking and being.
And did you go to the Andes?
I did not go down there. I studied with them in Santa Cruz, California.
Oh, you did. They gave you a balance. What I read in the Sacred Link, which is the new book that we're talking about today, but they gave you a balance in life, and they taught you things to use every day.
Every day. Their whole concept is not like having a religion. It's not something that is separate from the rest of your life. It's not a separate concept. It's their way of being is to live the sacredness, to live the happiness and the joy. They describe it as being in your own song all the time.
I was going to ask you about that. You talk about being in your own song, and once you read about it, it doesn't sound so bizarre. Tell us what being in your own song.
It's a poetic reference. That's the word that they used, was song, and it describes the totality of who and what we are as an entity, a spirit, a soul, our physical body, everything.
It seemed like when you talked about songs, you have your highs and your lows and your different notes, and that's what's happening in your body all the time.
It's a symphony.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an ongoing symphony. And so to be in your song is to learn how to turn your awareness, to focus it, purposefully turn it into the feeling, experiential state of your spirit.
And this frees you from being in the societal stupor that you talk about. What is that?
Yes.
What is that?
The Hedikas, that's the people that I studied with, Domano and Chia Hedika, they saw us as the walking dead. It's very uncomplimentary, but they felt like we were just kind of wandering around like walking dead people.
All of us.
Our whole culture.
Yeah, I see.
The whole
Right.
modern Western culture, with all of its little variations and little ethnic changes here and there, it's still basically a lot of the same culture. And we have this fog. It's like being drugged in this fog that...
so that's the stupor? Oh,
that's the stupor.
Societal stupor. I see. I got it now. I didn't understand it.
Domano described it one time to me like we create this little cardboard box that we sit in. There's no holes, there's no cracks, no doors, no windows. We're all crunched in there, and there's like a TV screen in front of our eyes, a little headset on our ears. We're not engaging the real world. We're not engaging us, the truth of us. And so we're being fed this information. Society has fed it to us, and now we feed it to ourselves automatically about who we're supposed to be, what the world should be, and we never really engage the truth.
But also in that teaching is in Sacred Link a link to sexuality.
Oh yes.
Which they must have taught you as well.
They believe that to make this fog that we're in and to keep us there, we're not like in our own driver's seat. We're not running the show really. It's all the automatic programming that sits in our driver's seat, and really we're like we're on automatic pilot. I mean, for real.
Well, then how does the sexuality come into it?
With the senses, sensuality and sexuality, that is one of the best ways to take away the true awareness of what the world is and what and who we actually are. So if we diminish the senses, if we diminish the sexuality, just take the volume and turn it down, then we end up in this fog. And the very best way to control a culture is to take the sexuality away from the women.
Is that right?
That is the fastest, easiest, longest lasting domination of a culture.
And then what happens?
The people become...
The men take over?
Yes, yes. In the Hedika's tradition, they see the world, they see everything kind of as a circle. They're always describing things as a circle. And they see the women as the center. Women are the axis of the wheel. They're the hearth, the fireplace that's in the center.
I can see that.
And the children they birth are there in the center with them. They see the men as creating the outer ring of the circle.
Protecting them.
Protecting, providing food, but also providing an emotional stability, a satisfaction, a happiness, that they believe that the women are happy and satisfied in all aspects of their life, that they will be raising happy, healthy children.
And is that Sacred Link what you want people to take away from? when they read the book? I mean, I'm
Yes,
sure there's
yes.
many things, because I know you teach so much.
The sacred link, sacred because all of us are a unique individual piece of Creator, and we're all linked in this magical outside of time-space way. We're all linked.
That was interesting, because you don't want to think you're linked to everybody, but this shows that you have that linkage.
We're not just linked to other humans, we're linked to everything.
Yeah.
And they see everything as being alive. Every atom, subatomic particle, bundles of energy, they see everything as being alive, thinking, having its own song, its own beingness.
Before we leave, really quickly, how did they learn all this? How did they come as to be the great teachers of what you're talking about?
It's their tribal way, their tribal tradition that they have kept intact for what they say hundreds of thousands of years.
So they've just passed it on?
They passed it on and passed it on very carefully. They believe that they came from a land that was in the Pacific Ocean that sank, and they went to South America and worked their way up the eastern side of the Andes, moving away from other tribes that were different.
Oh, I see.
So they felt they had a sacred task to keep this knowledge intact. The knowledge about song, the sacredness, the awakeness, and that someday it would be needed, that they would have to take it out to the rest of the world, and that's now.
And so that's what you're doing. You're continuing their teachings
Yes.
from the Andes to America.
Yes. Yes.
That's great. And you do readings, of course, of this, and you do lectures at universities and I'm
All
sure
over.
women's clubs
Oh yeah, yeah.
and at bookstores. And where do you live now?
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Is that the perfect place for this?
Oh, it's a good place. Yeah.
Or was Santa Cruz the perfect place?
Well, that's a good toss-up. Santa Cruz, such a wild and crazy place, and certainly back then in the 70s, you could see anything. Anything would happen. You could meet anybody in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
Wildest stuff went on.
Right. That's why this is like pretty good to be birthed there, this book.
That was a great place for this to happen. The
Yeah.
whole Santa Cruz area was just perfect, exquisite.
Thank you so much for coming and bringing Sacred Link and giving us a little bit of insight. I'm sure after 13 years plus all the time you've taken, you know more than we could ever hope to learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for being with us on the Joan Quinn Profiles today. Keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 90017. See you next time.